The silence of deep space surrounded Captain Raven Blackwood as she reviewed the day's patrol reports aboard the human exploration vessel Meridian. 3 weeks into their survey mission along the galactic rim, her crew had found nothing but empty star systems and cosmic dust. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency, her officers going about their duties with practiced ease. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors," called out Lieutenant Mason from the communications station. His voice carried a note of confusion that made Blackwood look up from her datapad. "Define strange, Lieutenant." "It's a transmission, ma'am. But it's not from any human colony. The signal pattern is completely unknown." Mason's fingers danced across his console, trying to clean up the interference. "The language translation software is working on it now." Blackwood stood and walked to the communications station. In her 15 years of space service, she had learned to trust her instincts. Something about this felt wrong. "Put it through the main speakers." Static filled the bridge for several seconds before the universal translator kicked in. When the voice came through, it was high-pitched and musical, but filled with unmistakable terror. "This is Ambassador Kesitai of the Villani Concordat, broadcasting on all frequencies. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help. The ancient enemy has returned. The Devourer swarm is real, and it's coming for us all." The bridge fell silent. Blackwood had never heard of the Villani, but the fear in the alien's voice was impossible to miss. "Lieutenant Mason, can you get a fix on the source?" "Working on it, Captain. The signal is coming from approximately 40 light-years spinward, but it's very weak. This transmission has been traveling for some time." The alien voice continued, growing more desperate with each word. 17 of our colonies have gone dark. We sent our fastest ships to investigate, but none returned. Our long-range telescopes show something impossible. The stars themselves are being extinguished. Whatever is doing this moves from system to system, leaving nothing behind. Blackwood felt a chill run down her spine. In all the years since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, they had encountered several alien species. Most were peaceful traders or isolationists who wanted nothing to do with humans. The idea of something that could destroy entire star systems was beyond anything in their experience. "Please, we know there are other species out there. The old records speak of fierce warriors from a death world, beings who knew how to fight, like no others. If anyone can hear this, if anyone can help us, please respond. We are running out of time." The transmission cut to static, then silence. Blackwood stared at the speakers for a long moment before turning to her science officer. "Dr. Webb, what do you make of this?" The elderly scientist adjusted his glasses and pulled up star charts on his station. "If the signal is genuine, Captain, we're looking at something unprecedented. The energy required to extinguish a star would be enormous. Nothing in our physics textbook suggests it's even possible. Unless," Webb continued slowly, "we're dealing with technology so advanced that it might as well be magic to us." Blackwood nodded grimly. She had read the historical files about humanity's early expansion into space. Earth was considered a death world by galactic standards, a planet where evolution had created predators and prey in an endless cycle of violence. Most other species came from garden worlds where conflict was rare and warfare almost unknown. "Lieutenant Mason, I want you to trace that signal back to its source. Get me everything you can about these Villani and their territory." She turned to her navigation officer. "Plot a course for the source of that transmission. Maximum speed." "Captain," her first officer, Commander Hayes, stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Shouldn't we contact Earth Command first? This could be a trap or a misunderstanding." Blackwood considered this for a moment. Hayes was right to be cautious, but something in the alien's voice convinced her this was real. "Send a message to Command, but we're not waiting for orders. If there's something out there that can destroy star systems, Earth needs to know about it immediately." As the Meridian changed course and jumped to faster-than-light speed, Blackwood couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Humanity had spent decades exploring the galaxy, always wondering when they would encounter something that challenged their growing confidence in space. It seemed that day had finally arrived. 3 days later, they reached the edge of Valani, space. What they found there defied explanation. Where star charts showed a thriving system with multiple planets, they found only darkness. The star itself was gone, along with everything that had once orbited it. In its place was a void so complete that even their most sensitive instruments detected nothing. "Captain, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the system," reported Dr. Webb, his voice tight with disbelief. "It's as if something systematically dismantled everything, right down to the atomic level." Lieutenant Mason suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I'm picking up another transmission. It's much stronger this time." The same musical voice filled the bridge, but now it carried the sound of complete despair. "This is Ambassador Cassatai, broadcasting from our homeworld of Thesara Prime. If anyone receives this message, please stay away. The swarm has found us. Our defenses are useless. They adapt to everything we try. Our weapons pass through their shields like they're not even there." Sounds of destruction came through the transmission. The musical harmony of Valani voices raised. In panic. "We estimate 12 hours before they reach our population centers. 20 billion souls live on this world. Our evacuation ships can save perhaps 1% of them." Blackwood clenched her fists. The number was staggering. She had seen war and destruction before, but the idea of 20 billion people facing extinction was beyond her ability to process. "They're machines," the transmission continued. "Ancient machines that seem to exist only to consume and destroy. They turn everything they touch into more of themselves. Our historians found references in the oldest texts, stories we thought were mythology. The devourer swarm, the hunger that ate the ancient galaxy." The signal began to break up, but Casatai's final words came through clearly. "To whoever finds this message, remember us. Remember that we tried to be good people. And if you have the power to stop this, please don't let them reach the core worlds. The galaxy doesn't deserve to end this way." Silence returned to the bridge. Blackwood looked around at her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. These were people who had volunteered for deep space exploration, knowing they might never return home. They understood risk and sacrifice better than most. "Lieutenant Mason, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." "Channel open, Captain." Blackwood took a deep breath. What she was about to say would either save the galaxy or doom it. "Earth Command, this is Captain Raven Blackwood aboard the Meridian. We have encountered a threat beyond anything in our protocols. Requesting immediate military response to coordinates I'm transmitting now. The enemy has the capability to destroy star systems and is moving toward inhabited space." She paused, knowing her next words would change everything. "Sir, I believe we're looking at an extinction-level event for all galactic civilization. The aliens are asking for help from Deathworld warriors. I think they mean us." The reply from Earth came after several long minutes, the time delay making conversation impossible. Admiral Kane's voice was calm but carried an edge that Blackwood recognized. "Message received, Captain. Maintain position and gather intelligence. The fleet is mobilizing." As Blackwood watched the empty space where a star system used to exist, she wondered if humanity was about to face something that even their warrior heritage couldn't overcome. In the distance, her sensors detected movement. Dark shapes that blocked out the stars themselves, moving with terrible purpose toward the heart of galactic civilization. Admiral Marcus Kane stood before the massive holographic display in Earth's Strategic Defense Command, watching as red warning indicators spread across the galactic map like a plague. Each blinking light represented a star system that had gone silent in the past 72 hours. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Something was moving through space, consuming everything in its path. "Admiral, we've lost contact with New Brisbane and the Titan mining stations," reported Colonel Martinez from the Communications Center. "That's 14 human colonies in 3 sectors. The pattern matches what Captain Blackwood reported from Villani space." Kane nodded grimly. At 62 years old, he had commanded Earth's military forces through 3 major conflicts and countless smaller engagements. He understood war in all its forms, but this was something else entirely. An enemy that could erase star systems, challenged every assumption about modern warfare. "What's the status on our deep reconnaissance missions?" Kane asked his intelligence officer. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez took the Ghost Protocol into the affected zone 6 hours ago. We should have her report soon." The officer paused, checking his displays. "Sir, we're also receiving requests for military assistance from 12 different species across 4 sectors. Everyone's panicking." Kane studied the holographic map, noting how the destruction moved in a deliberate pattern toward the galactic core, toward Earth. "They have good reason to panic. How long until this thing reaches Sol's system at its current rate?" "At current speed, approximately 18 days, sir." 18 days. Kane had fought battles that lasted months, but he had never faced an enemy with such devastating capability moving so quickly. The traditional rules of engagement meant nothing against something that could eliminate entire civilizations in hours. Dr. Tobias Reed burst through the command center doors, carrying a data tablet and looking like he hadn't slept in days. The chief scientist of the Terra Firma Research Institute was normally calm and methodical, but now his eyes held the wild intensity of a man racing against time. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the fragments Captain Blackwood's team collected from the edge of the destruction zone," Reed said, his words coming in a rush. "What we're facing isn't just advanced technology. It's a self-replicating machine intelligence that treats organic life as raw material." Kane turned from the map to face the scientist. "Explain." Reed activated his tablet, projecting a 3-dimensional model into the air between them. The shape was geometric and alien, covered in surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "The fragments show incredible sophistication. These machines can break down matter at the atomic level and rebuild it into whatever they need. They're not just destroying civilizations, they're converting them into more machines." "What about weaknesses?" Kane asked. "Everything has a weakness." "That's just it, Admiral. They adapt to everything. Every weapon we've tested, every defensive strategy our computers can simulate, they counter within minutes. It's like they're designed to be the perfect killing machine." Reed's shoulders sagged. "By all logical analysis, they're unbeatable." Kane was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien device rotating in the holographic display. In his decades of military service, he had learned to look beyond the obvious. Enemies that seemed invincible usually had flaws that weren't immediately apparent. "You said they adapt to everything," Kane said slowly. "But adaptation implies learning from experience. What if we gave them something they couldn't learn from?" Before Reed could respond, Colonel Martinez called out from across the command center. "Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Vasquez is transmitting from the Ghost Protocol." The main display switched to show Vasquez's pale face, her stealth frigate's bridge barely visible behind her. The interference in the transmission made her image flicker, but her voice came through clearly. "Admiral, I've got eyes on the swarm. You need to see this to believe it." The display split, showing what her ship's cameras were recording. Each unit is approximately the size of a small moon. There are hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation. They're not just ships. They're like floating cities, constantly building new machines from whatever they consume. Kane watched as the massive structures moved through space, their surfaces crawling with smaller machines that built and rebuilt components in endless cycles. The scale was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "How do they coordinate?" Kane asked. Something that large must have communication delays. That's the scary part, sir. They seem to share a collective intelligence. When one encounters something new, they all adapt instantly. I watched them encounter a Volani defense satellite. The first machine took damage from its weapons, but within seconds, every machine in the swarm had developed immunity. Kane felt the pieces of a plan beginning to form in his mind. Commander, I need you to maintain visual contact but stay hidden. Don't engage under any circumstances. Understood, Admiral. But, sir, at their current rate of advancement, they'll reach the next inhabited system in less than 6 hours. Kane cut the transmission and turned back to Dr. Reed. Doctor, you said, these machines are designed to be perfect. What if we gave them something imperfect? Something that doesn't follow logical patterns? Reed's eyes widened as he understood. You're talking about human warfare, our tendency to make decisions that don't make tactical sense. Exactly. Every other species in the galaxy fights logically. They maximize efficiency and minimize losses. But humans fight differently. We make sacrifices that don't make sense. We take risks that no computer would calculate as worthwhile. Kane walked back to the holographic map, his plan becoming clearer. If these machines learn by analyzing patterns, we need to show them something that has no pattern. Within hours, Earth's massive industrial complex roared to life. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels switched to military production. Weapons factories that had been mothballed since the last interstellar conflict came online, their assembly lines working around the clock. But Kane wasn't just building conventional warships. His orders called for vessels designed with one purpose: maximum damage delivery with no regard for crew survival. Ships that would ram enemy targets rather than fight at distance. Weapons that would detonate regardless of friendly fire concerns. The recruitment centers filled with volunteers. Word had spread quickly about the threat facing Earth and the galaxy. Former military personnel came out of retirement. Corporate security forces offered their services. Even reformed pirates contacted the recruitment offices, asking how they could help. Kane stood on the observation deck of the orbital shipyard, watching as the largest fleet in human history took shape. Hundreds of vessels of every size and configuration, from massive battleships to single-pilot fighters. None of them were built to last. All of them were built to hurt the enemy as much as possible before they died. Admiral, Colonel Martinez approached with the latest reports. We have confirmations from 15 different mercenary groups and 7 corporate security fleets. They're all volunteering for the mission. What about the other species? Are they contributing forces? Martinez shook his head. They're offering support personnel and supplies, but they say their military doctrines don't allow for the kind of engagement you're planning. They think we're insane. Kane smiled grimly. Good. That means we're on the right track. He turned from the window to address his staff. Gentlemen, we have 14 days to complete the largest military mobilization in human history. Every ship, every weapon, every person who's willing to fight goes into this fleet. Sir, one of his aides asked nervously, what if this doesn't work? What if even our unconventional tactics can't stop them? Kane looked out at the growing fleet, thinking of the billions of people depending on their success. Then we'll make sure our failure costs them so much that the next species has a chance to succeed. Sometimes the best way to win is to make victory too expensive for the enemy. As alarms echoed through the shipyard, signaling another system going dark, Kane made his final preparations. In 12 days, humanity would either save the galaxy or die trying. For a species from a death world, those seemed like acceptable odds. Commander Jake Morrison felt the Iron Maiden shudder around him as the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thessera system. Through the viewports of his battle cruiser's bridge, he could see the nightmare they had come to fight. Massive geometric shapes moved between the planets like metal storms, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities. The Devourer swarm had arrived first. Jesus Christ, whispered his weapons officer, Lieutenant Park. "Look at the size of those things." Morrison activated the fleet communication channel. "All ships. This is Morrison aboard the Iron Maiden. You can see what we're up against. Remember the plan. We're not here to win a clean victory. We're here to buy time and make them pay for every inch." The tactical display showed the full scope of Admiral Kane's fleet. 300 ships of every class and configuration, from massive dreadnoughts to small fighters. Most of them would not survive the next few hours, and everyone aboard knew it. Captain Lisa Thompson's voice crackled over the comm from her bomber squadron. "Morrison, my birds are loaded and ready. Just point us at the biggest, ugliest target you can find." Below them, the crystal cities of Thessera Prime sparkled like jewels against the planet's surface. But even as they watched, sections of those cities began to go dark as swarm machines descended like mechanical locusts. Somewhere, down there, Ambassador Kesetai and 20 billion Villani civilians waited for rescue that might never come. "All ships, execute Blackjack Protocol," Morrison ordered. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's show these machines what Deathworld warriors look like." The human fleet attacked with a brutality that shocked even their own allies. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting tactical maneuvers, they charged straight at the swarm machines with weapons blazing. The first wave of destroyers didn't try to avoid enemy fire. They aimed their ships like missiles, ramming into the massive constructs. At full speed, Morrison watched on his tactical display as the destroyer Hamilton slammed into a swarm unit the size of a mountain. The explosion lit up space for several seconds before fading, leaving a significant scar on the alien machine's surface. The swarm unit tried to analyze what had happened, its adaptive systems struggling to understand why the humans had deliberately destroyed their own ship. "Iron Maiden, this is Reaper Squadron," came Thompson's voice over the comm. "We're beginning our attack run." Morrison switched to external cameras to watch Thompson's 12 bombers dive toward the largest swarm unit. Their approach was suicidal, flying directly into the heaviest concentration of enemy defenses with no regard for evasive action. One by one, the bombers were destroyed by the machine's defensive systems, but each one managed to deliver its payload before dying. "Reaper lead to Iron Maiden." Thompson's voice was calm, despite the chaos around her. "I'm the last one left, payload armed and ready. It's been an honor serving with you lunatics." Morrison watched as Thompson's bomber, trailing fire and atmosphere, plowed straight through the swarm unit's defensive grid. Her final transmission was filled with the kind of dark humor that only humans seem to possess in their darkest moments. "Tell my mom I died doing something incredibly stupid." The explosion that followed tore a massive hole in the swarm unit's structure. For the first time since their arrival, one of the ancient machines showed signs of real damage. Its perfect geometric form was broken, its internal systems exposed to space. But the swarm adapted quickly. Within minutes, the damaged unit began, rebuilding itself using materials harvested from destroyed human ships. The other machines updated their defensive patterns, making similar attacks much more difficult. On the surface of Thessera Prime, Colonel Dmitry Volkov led his ground forces through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful crystal city. The Villani architecture was unlike anything in human experience. Buildings that grew like living things, their surfaces shimmering with internal light. Now those same buildings were being systematically dismantled by small harvester drones that moved like mechanical insects. "Volkov to all units," the colonel spoke into his helmet comm. "Remember, we're not fighting to hold territory. We're fighting to buy time for the evacuation ships. Every minute we delay them is another 1,000 civilians who make it off-planet." His soldiers moved through the ruins with practiced efficiency, using every dirty trick that warfare on Earth had taught them. They set traps using the city's own structure, turning Villani artwork into improvised explosives. When the harvester drones adapted to their conventional tactics, the humans switched to methods no sane military would approve of. Sergeant Rodriguez led a squad into the city's central power plant, carrying enough explosives to level several city blocks. "Colonel, we can deny them the power grid, but we'll have to detonate manually. Remote signals aren't getting through." Volkov understood what Rodriguez was really saying. "Understood, Sergeant. Make it count." Rodriguez and his squad had volunteered for a mission they knew was suicide. As the swarm machines closed in on the power plant, they positioned themselves at critical points throughout the facility. Their final act was to detonate every explosive they carried simultaneously, turning the entire power plant into a massive crater. Above the planet, Morrison realized that the swarm's greatest strength was also its weakness. The machines shared information instantly, but that meant they all had the same blind spots. They couldn't understand why humans kept making decisions that made no tactical sense. "All remaining ships? This is Morrison. I've got an idea, but it's completely insane." He looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had signed up for exploration missions, not suicide attacks, but none of them showed any hesitation. "Sir, we're already committed to completely insane," replied his navigation officer. "What's the plan?" Morrison studied the tactical display, noting how the swarm machines moved in perfect coordination. Their collective intelligence made them incredibly efficient, but it also meant they couldn't comprehend true randomness. "We're going to ram the biggest one," Morrison said simply. "But we're not going to aim for any critical systems or try to maximize damage. We're going to hit it in the most pointless, wasteful way possible." His crew stared at him for a moment before his weapons officer started laughing. "Sir, that's the stupidest plan I've ever heard." "Exactly. That's why it might work." The Iron Maiden turned toward the largest swarm unit, a structure so massive it had its own gravitational field. Morrison pushed the engines to maximum power, accelerating directly toward what appeared to be the least important section of the machine. No critical systems, no obvious weak points, just a random piece of hull that served no apparent purpose. The swarm units detected the approach and tried to predict where Morrison would strike. Their analysis suggested he was attempting a deception, that his real target must be something vital to their operations. They reinforced critical systems and prepared countermeasures for a logical attack. Instead, Morrison did exactly what he said he would do. The Iron Maiden struck the machine at its most meaningless point, causing damage that served no strategic purpose and achieved no tactical objective. It was, by every military standard in the galaxy, a completely wasted sacrifice. But that waste broke something in the swarm's collective mind. For the first time in their existence, they encountered an action that had no logical purpose, no strategic value, no rational explanation. Their adaptive systems tried to understand what they had witnessed, but there was nothing to understand. It was pure, irrational human spite. As the Iron Maiden died in fire and metal, Morrison's final words echoed across the fleet communication channels. They weren't words of courage or determination, but a string of creative profanity directed at the machines that had killed him. Even in death, he was acting in a way the swarm couldn't comprehend. The effect rippled through the collective intelligence, like a virus. The machines began to hesitate, their perfect coordination faltering as they tried to process the implications of Morrison's meaningless sacrifice. For just a moment, the unstoppable force that had consumed 17 star systems stopped moving entirely. In that moment of hesitation, the evacuation ships carrying Vallani civilians broke orbit and jumped to safety. 20 billion people owed their lives to a completely pointless act of human defiance. On Thessera Prime, Colonel Volkov's remaining forces used the confusion to establish defensive positions around the remaining civilian centers. The swarm would recover from their confusion eventually, but they had learned something that would change the course of the war. They had encountered an enemy that didn't fight to win, but to ensure their opponents paid the highest possible price for victory. And for machines designed to be perfectly efficient, inefficiency was the one thing they couldn't understand. Captain Nora Steele stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching as Dr. Reed made final adjustments to the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever created. The experimental vessel hung in space at the edge of the Thesara system, where the scattered remains of Morrison's fleet regrouped after their costly victory. "Doctor, are you certain this will work?" Steele asked, studying the complex device that filled half of her ship's cargo bay. The weapon looked deceptively simple, a sphere of crystalline components surrounded by processing units that hummed with barely contained energy. Reed wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and stress. "The theory is sound, Captain. The swarm's adaptive nature is their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. This virus will turn that adaptation against them." Admiral Kane's voice crackled over the communication system from the fleet command ship. "All units, we have confirmation that the swarm is regrouping. They're incorporating the wreckage from our ships into new constructs. We have perhaps 6 hours before they resume their advance." Steele looked at the tactical display showing the massive machines surrounding Thesara Prime. They moved differently now, less efficiently than before. Morrison's sacrifice had introduced something like doubt into their collective consciousness, but they were learning to compensate. "How does the virus work exactly?" Steele asked Reed. "It's based on the chaos principle that Morrison demonstrated," Reed explained, activating a holographic display. "Instead of trying to destroy their adaptive systems, we're going to corrupt them. The virus will cause their machines to adapt to problems that don't exist, creating solutions for threats that aren't real." The display showed a simulation of swarm machines caught in endless cycles of self-modification. Each machine would detect a phantom threat, adapt to counter it, then detect the adaptation as a new threat requiring further modification. The cycle would continue until the machines cannibalized themselves in pursuit of perfect efficiency. "But there's a risk," Reed continued, his voice growing serious. "The virus is designed to spread through any networked system. If it escapes the swarm and reaches galactic computer networks, it could crash civilization's technology infrastructure." Steele understood the implications immediately. "You're talking about sending us back to the Stone Age." "Possibly. The virus is designed to target adaptive systems specifically, but computer networks are inherently adaptive. There's no way to contain it once we release it." Before Steele could respond, her communications officer called out from across the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's Colonel Volkov." The main screen displayed the Russian officer's dirt-stained face, his uniform torn and bloodied from days of continuous fighting. Behind him, the ruins of crystal cities burned in the distance. "Fleet Command, this is Volkov. My forces are down to 30% strength, but we're holding the evacuation zones. However, we've discovered something important about the swarm's behavior." Kane's voice came over the comm. "Report, Colonel." "Sir, the machines are showing signs of psychological warfare adaptation. They're studying human behavior patterns and trying to predict our next moves. But they're also showing frustration, if that's the right word for it. When we act irrationally, their efficiency drops significantly." Volkov paused, ducking as an explosion lit up the sky behind him. "Admiral, I think we can push them over the edge. But it's going to require one more completely insane sacrifice." Major Alex Torres listened to the briefing from his position aboard the assault transport Thunderstrike. His mission was simple in concept, but impossible in execution. Lead a small team into the heart of the largest swarm construct and plant Dr. Reed's virus at its central processing core. "The entry point is here," Torres explained to his team, pointing at a holographic representation of the massive machine. "Intelligence suggests this is where they process information from all the smaller units. If we can plant the virus there, it should spread to the entire collective." Sergeant Williams, Torres's demolitions expert, studied the route they would have to take. "Sir, this passage goes right through the machine's defensive grid. Even if we make it inside, we'll have to fight our way through kilometers of automated defenses." "And the exit strategy?" asked Corporal Martinez, already knowing the answer. Torres looked at his team, 12 volunteers who had signed up for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. There isn't one. This is a one-way trip. We get the virus to the core, and hopefully the swarm destroys itself before it can reach Earth. The Thunderstrike launched from the Prometheus Unbound's docking bay, carrying Torres and his team toward the largest swarm construct. As they approached, the machine's surface came into focus, a maze of geometric patterns that shifted and flowed like living metal. "Remember," Torres told his team as they prepared for insertion, "act as irrationally as possible. Sing songs, tell jokes, make decisions that don't make sense. The more confused we can make their analysis systems, the better our chances." The insertion pod slammed into the machine's hull with tremendous force, its shaped charges tearing through the alien metal. Torres and his team dropped into a corridor that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, the walls covered in surfaces that reflected their movements in strange geometric patterns. As they moved deeper into the machine, they encountered the first, defensive drones. Instead of taking cover or following standard tactical procedures, Torres ordered his team to charge directly at the enemies while singing an old drinking song at the top of their lungs. The drones' targeting systems struggled to process the contradiction between the humans' aggressive advance and their seemingly celebratory behavior. Several seconds of confusion was all Torres needed to destroy the defensive position and move deeper into the construct. "Torres to Fleet Command," he radioed back to the ships. "We're inside the machine. The virus deployment point is still 3 kilometers ahead, but we're making progress. The defenses are definitely confused by our approach." For 2 hours, Torres and his team fought their way through the machine's interior, using every irrational tactic they could imagine. They played music during firefights, shared jokes while planting explosives, and made tactical decisions by flipping coins rather than analyzing situations. By the time they reached the central processing core, only Torres and Sergeant Williams remained alive. The chamber around them was vast, filled with crystalline structures that hummed with the collective intelligence of the entire swarm. "This is it," Torres said, pulling the virus device from his pack. "Williams, you still with me?" The sergeant nodded, blood running down his face from a head wound. "All the way, Major. Let's finish this." Torres activated the virus and watched as it began to interface with the swarm's central systems. Almost immediately, the crystalline structures around them began to flicker and change, their perfect patterns dissolving into chaos. "Torres to all ships," he transmitted. "Virus is deployed and spreading. You should start seeing effects immediately." Throughout the swarm fleet, the machines began to turn on each other. Their adaptive systems, corrupted by Reed's virus, started detecting threats that didn't exist and implementing solutions that created new problems. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable dissolved into mechanical pandemonium. On the Sara Prime, Colonel Volkov watched in amazement as the swarm machines stopped their systematic destruction and began dismantling each other. "Fleet Command, this is Volkov. The enemy is in complete disarray. They're literally tearing themselves apart." But aboard the Prometheus Unbound, Dr. Reed monitored the virus's spread with growing alarm. "Captain, the virus is working too well. It's spreading faster than our projections indicated. At this rate, it will reach galactic computer networks within days." Steele understood the implications. "Doctor, can we stop it?" Reed shook his head. "Not without destroying every computer system in the galaxy. We've unleashed something that can't be contained." As the swarm consumed itself in an orgy of self-destruction, the human fleet watched with mixed emotions. They had saved the galaxy from one threat, but possibly doomed it to technological collapse. Ambassador Kesetai, observing from the bridge of a human rescue ship, finally understood the price of asking Deathworlders for help. "Your people don't just fight wars," she said to Captain Steele. "You fight with the understanding that victory might destroy you as well." Steele nodded. watching the last of the swarm machines tear themselves apart. Sometimes survival requires making choices that civilized species can't make. We're willing to break the galaxy to save it. In the ruins of the largest swarm construct, Major Torres and Sergeant Williams shared a final moment as the machine collapsed around them. They had completed their mission, but at a cost that wouldn't be fully understood until the virus reached the core worlds. "Think we did the right thing, Major?" Williams asked as debris began to fall around them. Torres smiled, thinking of Earth and all the worlds they had saved. "We did what humans do, Sergeant. We made the hard choice so others wouldn't have to, the Phi." Machine's death throes buried them both, but their sacrifice had given the galaxy a chance to survive, even if survival came at a price no one could have imagined. Admiral Raven Blackwood stood in the conference room aboard the rebuilt orbital station above Earth, facing representatives from 37 different species. The Galactic Council had convened an emergency session to address what historians were already calling the Swarm War, but the atmosphere was far from celebratory. "The threat has been eliminated," announced Chancellor Vexmore of the Hegemony Coalition, his reptilian features showing obvious discomfort. However, the methods used by the human forces have raised serious concerns about future galactic security. Blackwood, recently promoted after Captain Morrison's sacrifice, listened to the proceedings with growing frustration. 6 months had passed since the swarm's destruction, and the galaxy was still dealing with the aftermath of Dr. Reed's virus. Computer systems across 12 sectors had crashed, requiring complete rebuilding of technological infrastructure. "With respect, Chancellor," Blackwood replied, "your concerns about our methods seem premature, given that your species still exists because of them." Ambassador Kesetai of the Villani Concordat shifted nervously in her crystalline chair. Since her rescue from Thessera Prime, she had become humanity's strongest advocate in the Council. But even she struggled with what she had witnessed. "The humans saved us," Kesetai said carefully, "but at a cost we're still calculating. 27 billion people are alive today because of their sacrifice, yet their willingness to risk galactic civilization itself is troubling." Dr. Reed entered the conference room carrying the latest reports from the technology recovery teams. His hair had gone completely gray in the months since the war, aged by the weight of decisions that had changed the galaxy forever. "The virus has been contained," Reed announced to the assembly. "Our teams have developed countermeasures and are helping to rebuild the affected systems. However, the process will take years, possibly decades." "That's exactly our concern," interjected Ambassador Thelnox of the Merchant Guilds. "Your species demonstrated a willingness to destroy the very foundation of modern civilization to achieve victory. How can we trust you with that kind of power?" Blackwood felt her temper rising, but kept her voice level. "You're asking the wrong question, Ambassador. The question isn't whether you can trust us with power. The question is whether you can afford to restrict the people who saved your lives." The debate continued for hours, with some species calling for limitations on human military expansion, while others quietly requested human military advisors. The galaxy had learned that Deathworlders were necessary, but they still feared the implications of that necessity. During a recess, Blackwood found herself alone with Kesetai on the station's observation deck. Through the massive windows, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and deceptively peaceful. "Your people terrify us," Kesetai said quietly, her musical voice carrying notes of genuine fear. "We asked for help, and you brought annihilation. You saved us by nearly destroying everything we value." Blackwood nodded, understanding the alien's perspective. "I know. We terrify ourselves sometimes. But that's what you get when you ask warriors from a death world for help. We don't fight pretty wars with clean victories. We fight to win, regardless of the cost." "But why?" Kesetai asked. "Your planet could have developed peaceful solutions. Your intelligence is obvious, your technology advanced. Why did you choose to become destroyers?" We didn't choose, Blackwood replied, thinking of Earth's violent history. Our world chose for us. Every species on Earth fights for survival every day. We learned to be predators because the alternative was extinction. When you asked for help against the swarm, you were asking us to be what evolution made us. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the station. Blackwood's communicator activated with Admiral Kane's voice, tense with controlled urgency. All senior staff to the command center immediately. We have a new situation developing in the galactic core. The command center buzzed with activity as officers analyzed data streaming in from deep space observatories. The main display showed energy signatures that dwarfed even the Devourer swarm, moving outward from the galaxy's central black hole. "What are we looking at?" Blackwood asked as she joined the crowd around the central console. "Something big is waking up in the galactic core," reported Dr. Martinez, the station's chief scientist. "Energy readings suggest structures the size of solar systems, possibly artificial in origin." Kane studied the data with the expression of a man who had hoped never to see another galactic crisis. "How long until we know more?" "Our deep space probes should reach the area in approximately 48 hours. But Admiral, the energy patterns are unlike anything we've encountered. This could make the swarm look like a minor threat." Blackwood felt a familiar chill as she watched the readings spike across the displays. The galaxy had barely recovered from one crisis, and now they faced something potentially worse. "What's the response from the other species?" she asked. "The Council is calling for a diplomatic mission," Kane replied with obvious skepticism. "They want to establish communication and attempt peaceful resolution." "And if peaceful resolution fails?" Kane's smile held no humor. "Then they'll ask us to solve another impossible problem with methods they don't want to think about." Over the following days, the situation in the galactic core grew more serious. The unknown entities, whatever they were, had begun dismantling star systems with efficiency that made the swarm look wasteful. But unlike the mechanical plague they had recently defeated, these new threats showed signs of intelligence and purpose. Dr. Reed worked around the clock to develop new weapons, knowing that his virus wouldn't work against enemies that might not rely on networked systems. The technology that had saved them from the swarm would be useless against these new threats. "Admiral," Reed reported during a late-night briefing, "I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the core. These aren't machines like the swarm. They appear to be something much older, possibly ancient biological entities that have evolved beyond our understanding." "Weaknesses?" Kane asked. "Unknown. But based on their behavior patterns, they're deliberately avoiding inhabited systems for now. It's as if they're testing our responses, learning about current galactic civilization, before making their next move." Blackwood studied the tactical projections, noting how the entities moved with purpose rather than the mindless consumption of the swarm. "They're intelligent. That could work for us or against us." "How so?" Kane asked. "Intelligent enemies can be negotiated with, but they can also plan and anticipate our strategies. The swarm was predictable in its simplicity. These things might be playing a game we don't even understand." As if summoned by their conversation, alerts began sounding throughout the command center. The main display shifted to show a transmission, originating from the galactic core, the first communication from the unknown entities. The voice that emerged from the speakers was ancient beyond measure, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. When the translation systems processed the message, its content sent chills through everyone present. "Young species of this galaxy, we have observed your recent conflict. Your demonstration of destructive capability has been noted and evaluated. We are the architects, the builders of order, and we have returned to reclaim what was always ours." The transmission paused, and when it continued, the voice carried what might have been amusement. "Your Deathworld warriors interest us. We have not encountered such chaotic effectiveness in millions of years. We would speak with these humans who break galaxies to save them." Kane and Blackwood exchanged glances, both understanding the implications immediately. Humanity had gained a reputation that reached even the galaxy's most ancient powers. "Prepare a response," Kane ordered. "But also begin mobilizing the fleet. Something tells me these architects aren't looking for a friendly conversation." As preparations began for what might be humanity's greatest challenge yet, Ambassador Kesetai sent a private message to Admiral Blackwood. "We asked for salvation and received annihilation disguised as rescue. Now something far older and more powerful calls for you specifically. I fear we have awakened forces that will test whether Deathworld warriors can stand against true gods." Blackwood read the message while watching Earth's shipyards come alive once again, building vessels designed for wars that might determine the fate of all galactic civilization. Humanity had become the galaxy's protector through necessity, but they were learning that protection came with responsibilities no species should have to bear. "Let them come," she said to the empty observation deck, her words carried away by the recycled air. "If the galaxy needs monsters to fight gods, then monsters they'll have." In the depths of space, ancient powers stirred while Deathworld warriors prepared for a conflict that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. The universe had learned that sometimes there was no difference between salvation and destruction. Sometimes they were the same thing, delivered by the same hands that refused to let civilizations die quietly in the dark. The blue planet Velros shook under the bombardment. Great ships hung in the sky like dark metal clouds, raining fire down on the cities below. Thyra pressed her long fingers against the cold metal of the communication console, trying to keep her hands steady. Around her, the underground command center buzzed with desperate activity as her people tried to coordinate their failing defenses. "Council leader, the northern cities have gone silent," reported Commander Keln, his usually calm voice cracking. "We estimate 90% casualties." Thyra closed her large, gentle eyes for a moment. The Villani were a peaceful people. They had spent thousands of years building gardens on their worlds, creating art, and exploring the mysteries of science. They had never prepared for war because they could not imagine anyone would want to destroy something so beautiful. But the Yaviu, Krek's empire had no interest in beauty. They wanted resources, territory, and most of all, they wanted to prove their strength by crushing anyone who stood in their way. "How long until they break through our shields?" Thyra asked. 6 hours, maybe. "Less," Keln replied. "Their new weapons are too powerful. Our defenses were never meant for this kind of attack." Thyra walked to the main display screen that showed their solar system. Red dots marked Krek ships. There were so many of them, like a disease spreading across space. In just 3 months, they had destroyed 12 Villani worlds. Billions of her people were dead or enslaved. "Have we heard anything from the other Federation worlds?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Nothing, Council Leader. We believe Sanctuary Prime is the last free world in our territory." Thyra felt the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. She had led her people for 20 years of peace and prosperity. Now she would be remembered as the leader who watched them go extinct. "What about the galactic community? Any response to our calls for help?" Keln looked uncomfortable. "The major powers say this is a regional conflict. They will not intervene. The hegemony claims they are neutral. The trade union says they cannot spare resources. Of course they would not help. The galaxy was full of civilized species who preferred to ignore violence when it did not directly threaten them. They would wait and see who won, then make trade. Deals with whoever was left standing." Thyra stared at the tactical display for a long moment. Then she made a decision that surprised even herself. "Open an emergency broadcast channel. Maximum power. Send it on all frequencies. Council Leader, the Kreks will trace our location if we broadcast openly." "They already know where we are," Thyra said. "They are just taking their time to enjoy our suffering. Do it." The communications officer hesitated, then activated the system. "Channel open, Council Leader. You are broadcasting to the entire galaxy." Thyra took a deep breath. She had never been a warrior, but perhaps she could be remembered for trying one last desperate gambit. "This is Council Leader Thyra of the Villani Federation. Our people are dying. The Krex Empire has declared war on us without cause. They have destroyed our worlds and murdered billions of innocent civilians. We have tried diplomacy. We have offered them anything they wanted. They only want our complete destruction." She paused, listening to the sound of explosions somewhere above them as another part of their city was bombed. "We call upon any civilized species to help us. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, our alliance to anyone who will stand with us against this genocide. We know most of you will not answer. We know you think we are already dead. But if there is anyone out there who believes that peaceful people deserve to live, please help us. This may be our last transmission." Thyra cut the broadcast and slumped back in her chair. It was a hopeless gesture, but at least she had tried everything. "Should we prepare the evacuation ships?" Keln asked quietly. "Yes, get as many civilians off-world as possible. Target the outer colonies. Maybe some of our people can survive there." What she did not know was that her desperate message had traveled much farther than she had imagined. It crossed the galaxy at the speed of light, reaching systems she had never heard of. Most who received it ignored the transmission or filed it away as another regional conflict that was not their problem. But in one remote system at the edge of the galaxy, the message was received by people who understood exactly what it meant to fight for survival. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of Luna Station, Earth's primary military command center. The massive space station orbited humanity's ancient moon, bristling with weapons and sensors that watched for any threat to their home system. Kane was a tall man with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had been fighting humanity's enemies for 30 years. "Sir, we are receiving an alien transmission on multiple emergency frequencies," reported Lieutenant Davis from the communications. "Station! Patch it through," Kane ordered. The bridge fell silent as Thyra's voice filled the room, translated by their computers into English. When the message ended, Kane stared at the display for a long moment. "Analysis?" he asked his senior staff. "The transmission came from the Villani system, approximately 200 light-years from here," said Commander Williams, Kane's chief of staff. "We have some basic information about them in our xenological databases. Peaceful herbivorous species, advanced technology, but no military tradition. And the Krex? Aggressive, militaristic empire. They have been expanding rapidly over the past century, known for enslaving or exterminating conquered populations." Kane nodded slowly. Humanity had been watching the galaxy for decades, ever since. They had developed faster than light travel. Most alien species seemed to view humans as dangerous primitives from a death world. The official policy was to avoid contact unless absolutely necessary. "Sir," Davis spoke up hesitantly, "the Galactic Council has standing orders that we are not to interfere in alien conflicts." "I am aware of the Council's position, Lieutenant," Kane replied coldly. "I am also aware that while they debate protocol, an entire species is being murdered." Kane turned to face his staff. These were people who had served with him through the corporate wars, the Mining Belt Rebellion, and a dozen other conflicts that had shaped humanity's expansion into space. They understood that sometimes you had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. "Recommendations?" "The Villani transmission mentioned they have advanced technology and scientific knowledge," Williams said carefully. "That could be valuable to humanity. And there is a strategic consideration," added Chief Navigator Reeves. "If the Krex succeed in this campaign, they will control a significant portion of this galactic region. That could threaten our future expansion." Kane almost smiled. His officers were giving him political and strategic justifications for a decision he had already made on moral grounds. Good. That would make it easier to sell to Earth Command. What forces do we have available? The Third Fleet is completing exercises in the Titan system, Williams replied. 12 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and the dreadnought Terra's Fury. Full crew complements, fresh supplies. How long to reach the Volani system? Standard hyperspace route would take 8 days. But if we use the unstable jump points near the Veil Nebula, we could make it in 3 days. Kane considered the risks. The unstable hyperspace routes were dangerous, but they would cut their travel time in half, time that the Volani did not have. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we are investigating a potential first contact situation that may require defensive action. Order the Third Fleet to prepare for immediate departure. Sir, should we wait for authorization from Earth? Davis asked. Kane looked out at the stars visible through the bridge windows. Somewhere out there, people were dying, while bureaucrats debated policy. The authorization will catch up to us, he said. Launch in 6 hours. As his crew rushed to carry out his orders, Kane remained on the bridge, staring at the coordinates of the Volani system. Humanity had always been fighters. It was what had allowed them to survive on their harsh world and eventually reach the stars. Now they would find out if that same fighting spirit could save someone else. The message had been sent. The Deathworlders were coming. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system like ghosts emerging from the void. 12 warships hung in the darkness, their hulls scarred from countless battles and their weapons powered down but ready. At their head was the Terra's Fury, a massive dreadnought that could crack a moon in half with its main guns. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display. The system was a war zone. Burning debris from destroyed ships drifted between the planets. Several worlds showed the telltale signs of orbital bombardment, dead continents and poisoned atmospheres. Long-range sensors are picking up massive Krex fleet movements, reported Commander Williams. At least 40 ships, possibly more. They are concentrated around the 4th planet. That would be Sanctuary Prime, Kane said. The last Volani? Stronghold. He paused, considering their options. Can we establish communication with the planet? Working on it, sir. The Krex are jamming most frequencies, but we might be able to punch through on emergency channels. Kane nodded. Do it, and send a message to the Krex fleet commander. Tell them they are in violation of interstellar law and demand they withdraw immediately. Lieutenant Davis looked surprised. Sir, we are not part of any interstellar authority that would give us jurisdiction here. The Krex do not know that, Kane replied with a slight smile. Sometimes reputation is more important than legal authority. 3 ships away, Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser Defiant. She was younger than Kane, but had earned her command through exceptional skill and courage during the Belt Wars. Her ship was smaller than the Terra's Fury, but faster and more maneuverable. Captain, we are receiving a response from the planet's surface, her communications officer reported. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a being unlike any human had ever seen. Thyra had large, gentle eyes that seemed to reflect the wisdom of ages, and her skin had a faint blue tint. She looked exhausted and afraid. This is Council Leader Thyra. Who are you? How did you receive our transmission? Rodriguez leaned forward in her command chair. Council Leader, I am Captain Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Defiant. We received your distress call and have come to assist you. Thyra's expression shifted from hope to confusion to fear. Earth, I do not understand. Our databases show no species by that name in this region of space. We are from a system the galactic community classifies as prohibited contact. They call our world a death world. The Volani leader went very still. Death world? You mean you are the Deathworlders? Rodriguez could see the fear in Thyra's eyes. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was apparently not entirely positive. We prefer to call ourselves human, and we are here to help you. But the galactic databases say Deathworlders are savage and violent. They say contact with your species is forbidden because you bring only war and destruction. Council leader, Rodriguez said gently, we are violent when we need to be. Our world made us that way. But we fight to protect, not to destroy. Your people called for help, and we answered. Thyra stared at the screen for a long moment. Around her, Rodriguez could see other Villani moving frantically, probably preparing defenses or evacuations. How many ships do you have? 15 vessels, Council Leader. 15. Thyra's voice was barely a whisper. The Krex have over 60 ships in this system. You cannot possibly... Council Leader, you called for help. We came as fast as we could. We will do everything in our power to protect your people. The transmission cut out as Krex jamming intensified. Rodriguez sat back in her chair, troubled by the conversation. The Villani seemed more afraid of humans than of their genocidal enemies. What exactly had the galactic community been telling everyone about Earth? On the Krex flagship Dominator, General Vorth studied the sensor readings with growing irritation. The unknown ships had appeared suddenly and were maintaining position at the edge of the system. Their configuration was unlike anything in his databases. Analysis, he demanded. From his intelligence officer, the ships appear to be of unknown design, General. Heavy armor, multiple weapon systems, but their technology seems primitive. No energy shields, no gravitic drives. They appear to be using simple fusion engines and kinetic weapons. Vorth relaxed slightly. How many? 15 vessels, including one that appears to be a capital ship. And we have 62 ships in this system, including 3 dreadnoughts. Vorth made a dismissive gesture. Send a squadron to investigate. If they do not withdraw immediately, destroy them. The Krex were a proud warrior species that had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and ruthless tactics. They had never encountered serious resistance from the soft, peaceful species that populated this region of space. These unknown ships were probably just another minor species that thought they could interfere in Krex business. 12 Krex interceptors broke off from the main fleet and began accelerating toward the human formation. They were sleek, fast ships, armed with plasma cannons and protected by energy shields. Against the primitive vessels they were approaching, they would be unstoppable. Admiral Kane watched the approaching Krex ships on his tactical display. They are moving to intercept us. 12 light cruisers, closing fast. Orders, sir? Asked. Commander Williams. Kane considered his options. They needed to send a message to the Krex, but they also needed to avoid provoking a full fleet engagement until they were ready. Signal all ships, defensive formation. Do not fire unless fired. Upon. And if they do fire? Then we show them what Deathworlders can do. The Krex squadron leader, Commander Zek, smiled as he watched his prey hold position instead of fleeing. These aliens were either very brave or very stupid. Either way, they would be dead soon. Target the largest vessel. Full power to weapons, he ordered. The first plasma blast struck the human heavy cruiser Intrepid amidships. The crew expected to see the ship break apart under the impact. Instead, the energy beams splashed harmlessly across heavily armored hull plating, leaving only a slight scorch mark. What? Zek stared at his weapons officer. How did they survive a direct hit? Unknown, sir. Their armor appears to be much thicker than our models predicted. Before Zek could respond, the human ships opened fire. Instead of energy weapons, they used kinetic projectiles. Massive chunks of metal accelerated to incredible velocities. The first salvo tore through the Krex formation like a hammer through glass. 3 Krex ships died in the first exchange. Their energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, were useless against solid projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Evasive maneuvers, Zek screamed, but it was too late. The humans had anticipated their movements, firing where the Krex ships would be instead of where they were. Within 5 minutes, 10 of the 12 Krex interceptors were destroyed. The 2 survivors fled back toward their fleet, broadcasting frantic warnings about the unexpected capabilities of the unknown vessels. Captain Rodriguez watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Damage report. Minor hull scoring on 3 ships. No significant damage, her tactical officer reported. The Krex weapons are powerful, but not designed to penetrate our armor. That made sense. Most galactic species seem to prefer energy, shields over heavy armor. It was probably more efficient in most situations. But humans had been building warships to survive in the harsh environment around Earth, where debris fields and solar radiation made shields less reliable than thick metal plating. Admiral Kane opened a channel to the Krex fleet. Krex Commander, this is Admiral Kane of the Terran Defense Force. You have attacked our vessels without provocation. Withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences. General Vorth stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 12 of his ships had been destroyed by primitives using kinetic weapons. How was that possible? General, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown fleet. Vorth listened to Kane's ultimatum with growing anger. These aliens dared to threaten him. Send a response. Tell them they have 10 minutes to withdraw or we will destroy them all. But even as he gave the order, Vorth felt a strange unease. His intelligence officers were frantically updating their analysis of the human ships, and the numbers were not encouraging. The unknown vessels were built like fortresses, designed to absorb incredible amounts of damage, and their weapons, while primitive, were devastatingly effective. On Sanctuary Prime, Thyra watched the space battle through the planet's sensors. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. The Deathworlders had just destroyed 10 Krex ships without losing a single vessel of their own. Council Leader, Commander Keln said quietly. Perhaps we have been wrong about these humans. Thyra nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand that there was a difference between being violent and being evil. The Deathworlders might be dangerous, but they had come here to help. Open a channel to the human fleet, she ordered. It is time we properly introduced ourselves to our saviors. But even as hope began to grow in her heart, Thyra could see more Krex ships moving on the sensor display. The real battle was just beginning, and she feared that even the legendary ferocity of Deathworlders might not be enough to save her people. The orbital station above Sanctuary Prime was dying. Massive holes had been torn in its hull by Krex plasma cannons, and atmosphere was streaming out into space like blood from a wound. Inside the station, thousands of Villani civilians huddled in emergency shelters, waiting for rescue that might never come. Commander Jake Thompson studied the tactical display on his destroyer Lightning Strike. The station was surrounded by 8 Krex ships, methodically tearing it apart, section by section. They seemed to be enjoying the process, taking their time to maximize the terror of the trapped civilians. Sir, Admiral Kane is requesting a volunteer for the rescue mission, reported his communications officer. Thompson did not hesitate. Signal the Admiral. Lightning Strike volunteers. His crew looked at him with expressions ranging from determination to concern. Taking on 8 enemy ships with a single destroyer was not exactly a fair fight. But Thompson had been fighting impossible odds his entire career, first as a Marine on the corporate war worlds, and now as a ship commander. Fair fights were for people who had a choice. Battle stations, Thompson ordered. All hands prepare for combat. The destroyer accelerated toward the orbital station, its engines pushed to maximum power. Thompson had trained for this kind of mission. Rapid insertion, overwhelming force, quick extraction. The key was speed and violence. Hit the enemy. So hard and so fast that they could not organize an effective response. Range to target? 60,000 kilometers and closing, his tactical officer replied. Enemy ships are maintaining formation around the station. Lock all weapons on the lead ship. Full spread, everything we have. The lightning strike opened fire at maximum range, sending a barrage of kinetic projectiles toward the Krex formation. At the same time, Thompson ordered his helmsman to execute a series of random course changes, making his ship harder to target. The first salvo caught the Krex completely off guard. They had been focused on destroying the station and were not, expecting an attack from a single enemy ship. 2 Krex vessels died immediately as tungsten projectiles tore through their hulls at relativistic speeds. "Enemy ships are breaking formation," the tactical officer reported. "They are moving to engage us." "Good," Thompson replied. "That means they are not shooting at the civilians anymore." The lightning strike danced between the Krex ships like a boxer fighting multiple opponents. Thompson's crew had trained for this scenario countless times, using Earth's asteroid belts as practice grounds. They knew how to use momentum and maneuvering to even the odds against superior numbers. But the Krex were not helpless. Their remaining ships began to coordinate their attacks, trying to box in the human destroyer. Plasma beams lashed out from multiple directions, some coming close enough to char the lightning strike's armor. "Hull breach on Deck 7. The damage control officer reported. "Sealing blast doors now." Thompson ignored the damage reports. He had bigger problems to worry about. 2 more Krex ships had joined the battle from the main fleet, and his ammunition was running low. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the orbital station," the communications officer said. "They are requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Tell them to prepare all civilians for emergency transport. We are coming in hot." Thompson aimed his ship directly at the orbital station, using the massive structure as cover from the Krex. Weapons. It was a dangerous maneuver that required split-second timing, but it worked. The lightning strike slipped into the station's docking bay just as several plasma beams converged on their previous position. Inside the station, Thompson led a team of Marines through corridors filled with smoke and debris. The Volani civilians they encountered were unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, graceful beings with large eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of a peaceful evolution on a gentle world. "How many civilians?" Thompson asked the station commander, a Volani named Elder Neris. 3,000 in the secure sections, perhaps 500 more scattered throughout the damaged areas. Thompson did some quick calculations. His ship could carry maybe 400 people in an emergency evacuation. They would need multiple trips, and the Krex were not going to wait patiently while he ferried civilians to safety. "We will get your people out," he promised. "But we need to move fast." The first group of evacuees was loaded onto the lightning strike within 20 minutes. Thompson's crew worked with practiced efficiency, turning cargo bays and even weapons storage areas into temporary passenger compartments. It was not comfortable, but it was better than dying in the vacuum of space. As soon as the ship was loaded, Thompson ordered an emergency departure. The lightning strike burst out of the docking bay like a bullet from a gun, immediately coming under fire from the waiting Krex ships. But Thompson had expected this. He had programmed a series of random jumps that would take his ship away from the battle zone before the enemy could lock onto his position. The first evacuation run was successful, but it was only the beginning. Thompson made 4 more trips to the station, each one more dangerous than the last as the Krex began to anticipate his tactics. On the final run, his ship took a direct hit that knocked out his main engines and killed 6 crew members, but they got the last of the civilians out. Meanwhile, the main human fleet was engaged in its own desperate battle. General Vorth had committed half his forces to destroying the unknown aliens, sending 30 ships against the 15 human vessels. He expected it to be a quick victory that would demonstrate Krex superiority to any other species thinking of interfering. Instead, he found himself fighting an enemy unlike any he had encountered before. Admiral Kane commanded his fleet from the bridge of the Terra's Fury, watching as his ships executed a battle plan that would have been considered insane by most galactic military standards. Instead of maintaining a defensive formation, the human ships were spread out across the system, using hit-and-run tactics to pick off isolated Krex vessels. "Enemy dreadnought closing on our position," Commander Williams reported. Range 50,000 kilometers. Kane studied the tactical display. The Krex ship was larger than his own flagship and bristling with weapons. In a straight fight, it would probably win. But Kane had no intention of fighting fair. Signal Captain Rodriguez. Execute attack pattern Delta. 3 human cruisers suddenly appeared from behind a small moon, their weapons already charged and aimed at the Krex dreadnought's engines. The surprise attack crippled the enemy ship's propulsion systems, leaving it drifting helplessly, while the Terra's fury moved in for the kill. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, 23 Krex ships had been destroyed or disabled, while the human fleet had lost only 2 vessels, a destroyer and a frigate that had sacrificed themselves to save a crippled cruiser. General Vorth stared at the tactical display in shock. His forces had been decimated by primitives using obsolete weapons and crude tactics. How was this possible? General, we are receiving reports from across the system, his communications officer said nervously. The unknown aliens have been conducting rescue operations at 17 different locations. They have evacuated over 50,000 Villani civilians. Vorth felt a chill run down his spine. These aliens were not just fighting his ships. They were actively saving the people he was trying to kill. It was a level of tactical coordination and strategic thinking that he had not expected from any species, let alone one using such primitive technology. What is the status of our reinforcement fleet? ETA 12 hours, General. The Death's Herald and her escort ships are approaching maximum speed. The Death's Herald was the pride of the Krex fleet, a super dreadnought capable of destroying entire planets. With that ship leading the attack, even these troublesome Deathworlders would be crushed. But Vorth could not shake the feeling that he was missing something important about these humans. They fought with a ferocity and determination that reminded him of stories his grandfather had told about the ancient Krex warrior poets, before the Empire became focused on conquest and domination. On Sanctuary Prime, Thyra watched the rescue operations with growing amazement. The human ships were everywhere, pulling her people from damaged stations, evacuating threatened colonies, even landing Marines on the planet's surface to help with ground-based evacuations. She had opened direct communication with Admiral Kane, and their conversation had revealed much about the species that had come to help her people. "Admiral, why did you come here?" she asked. "Your species has no ties to ours. You risk your lives for people you have never met." Kane's image on the screen showed a man who had clearly seen much combat, but his eyes held a warmth that surprised her. "Council leader, my people know what it means to fight for survival. We know what it means to have enemies who want to destroy everything you have built. When we heard your call for help, we could not ignore it. But the galactic community says your species is dangerous. That contact with Deathworlders brings only violence." Kane smiled grimly. "The galactic community is half right, Council Leader. We do bring violence, but we bring it to those who threaten. The innocent. Your people called for help and we answered. That is what humans do. But the humans had something their enemies lacked. The desperate fury of a species that had learned to fight on a world that actively tried to kill them. Dr. Morgan had been right about Krex psychology. As their command centers fell one by one, the massive ship's crew began to lose coordination. Automated systems conflicted with manual overrides. Communications broke down. Fear spread through the ship like a virus as crews realized they were trapped with an enemy that seemed impossible to stop. In the end, it was Maya Patel who found the solution. Working with a team of engineers who had fought their way to the ship's main reactor, she discovered that the Death's Herald's power systems were vulnerable to a specific type of electromagnetic pulse. "If we can overload the main reactor for just 30 seconds, she explained to Kane over the communication link, "it will create a feedback loop that will shut down every system on the ship." "What is the risk?" "The reactor could explode and take out everything within 100 kilometers, or it could just shut down safely," I am honestly not sure. Kane considered the alternatives. If the Death's Herald remained operational, it would eventually overwhelm the human fleet and destroy Sanctuary Prime. If the reactor exploded, it would take out several human ships along with the Krek's flagship. But if it worked as planned, do it, Kane ordered. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the Death's Herald's reactor was visible across the entire system. For a moment, it seemed as if a new star had been born in the darkness of space. Then the light faded, and the massive Krek's flagship went completely dark. General Vorth found himself trapped on a dead ship, surrounded by the bodies of his crew, and the sound of human boots marching through his corridors. When Admiral Kane finally reached the bridge, Vorth was alone except for a handful of surviving officers. "Surrender," Kane said simply. Vorth looked at the human admiral with a mixture of respect and fear. This was not how wars were supposed to be fought. Civilized species did not board enemy ships and disable them from within. They did not ram vessels at full speed or use their own bodies as weapons. They certainly did not turn captured ships against their former allies. But as Vorth studied Kane's face, he realized something that chilled him to his core. To these Deathworlders, this was just another Tuesday. They fought this way, not because they were desperate, but because it was their nature. They had evolved on a world so hostile that only the most aggressive and adaptable had survived to reach the stars. "I surrender," Vorth said quietly. Across the system, the remaining Krek's ships were already fleeing toward the hyperspace jump points. Word of the Death's Herald's capture had spread through their fleet like wildfire, carrying with it the terrifying realization that they were fighting an enemy that could not be defeated by superior technology alone. But even as Kane accepted the Krek's surrender, his sensors were detecting new contacts at the edge of the system. More ships were coming, and this time they were not Krek's. The galaxy had finally noticed that the Deathworlders were at war. When Deathworlders unite, the new arrivals were not what Admiral Kane expected. As the ships dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Volani system, his sensors identified them as vessels from a dozen different species. Some he recognized from galactic databases, others completely unknown. They flew in loose formations that suggested a hastily assembled coalition rather than a unified fleet. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," reported Lieutenant Davis. "It is on the general communication frequency used by the Galactic Council." Kane exchanged glances with Commander Williams. The Galactic Council had been notably absent when the Volani called for help. What were they doing here now? "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of an alien Kane had never seen before. The being had 4 eyes arranged symmetrically around a central mouth, and its skin had a crystalline quality that suggested a silicon-based biology. "This is Fleet Commander Zalt of the Galactic Council Peacekeeping Force. Unknown vessels, you are ordered to cease hostilities immediately and withdraw from this system pending a full investigation of this incident." Kane felt his jaw clench. Incident. These people had watched genocide unfold for months and called it an incident. "Fleet Commander, this is Admiral Kane of the Terran Defense Force. We responded to a distress call from the Volani Federation and acted to prevent their extermination. The Krek's forces have been defeated, and their leadership has surrendered." "Admiral Kane." Zalt's voice carried a tone of bureaucratic condescension. "The Terran species is classified as prohibited contact under Council Resolution 2847. Your presence in galactic space is a violation of interstellar law. You will surrender your vessels for impoundment and your crews for processing." Williams leaned close to Kane and whispered, "Sir, the Council fleet has 47 ships. If they decide to enforce their order..." Kane studied the tactical display. His fleet was down to 8 operational vessels after the brutal fight with the Krek's. His ships were damaged, his crews exhausted, and his ammunition running low. In a straight fight against the Council fleet, they would lose. But Kane had not come this far to surrender to bureaucrats. "Fleet Commander Zalt, Kane replied calmly. We came here in response to a plea for help from a peaceful species facing genocide. We have acted within the bounds of basic morality and interstellar law. We will not surrender our ships or our crews. Then you will be taken by force, Zalt responded. All council ships, prepare to engage the prohibited vessels. But before the council fleet could begin its attack, something unexpected happened. The Volani defense platforms around Sanctuary Prime powered up their weapons and targeted the council ships. This is Council Leader Thyra. Her voice cut across all communication frequencies. Fleet Commander Zalt, you are not welcome in our system. The human fleet acted at our direct request to defend our people from extermination. Any attack on them will be considered an act of war against the Volani Federation. Kane stared at the display in amazement. The peaceful Volani, who had never fired a shot in anger during their entire recorded history, were pointing weapons at the Galactic Council. But Thyra was not finished. Furthermore, we formally request that the Terran Defense Force accept our invitation to establish a permanent military alliance. We hereby grant them full access to our space and resources. Zalt's crystalline features showed what Kane assumed was shock. Council Leader Thyra, you cannot grant military access to a prohibited species. The Council will not recognize any such agreement. Then the Volani Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, Thyra replied without hesitation. We choose our own allies. The communication channel fell silent as the implications of Thyra's words sank in. The Volani Federation was one of the most advanced scientific civilizations in the galaxy. Their research had contributed to everything from medical technology to hyperspace navigation. Losing them would be a devastating blow to the Council's prestige and resources. Kane opened a private channel to the Volani leader. Council Leader, you do not need to do this for us. We came here to help you, not to cause you political problems. Thyra's large eyes seemed to glow with determination. Admiral, my people have learned something important these past few days. We learned that there is a difference between civilization and weakness. For too long, we have been weak and called it civilization. You have shown us what it means to fight for what is right. As if to emphasize her point, the Volani defense platforms locked their targeting systems onto the lead council ship. The platforms were designed for asteroid mining, but their plasma cutters could easily slice through warship armor at close range. Fleet Commander Zalt found himself facing a situation that was not covered in any council protocol. The prohibited. Deathworlders had not only defeated a major Krex fleet, but had also convinced a council member species to withdraw from the galactic community. Worse, other ships in his own fleet were beginning to transmit messages that suggested not everyone agreed with the Council's position. Admiral Kane, a new voice cut into the communication channel. This is Captain Reth of the merchant vessel Far Wanderer. My crew and I have been following the reports of your actions here. We want you to know that not everyone in the galaxy agrees with the Council's treatment of your species. Captain Reth, you are ordered to maintain communication silence, Zalt commanded. With respect, Fleet Commander, I am not under Council military authority, Reth replied. Admiral Kane, there are species throughout the galaxy that have been watching your battle here with great interest. Many of us have grown tired of the Council's policy of non-intervention when faced with aggression. More voices joined the channel. Ship captains from a dozen different species, all expressing support for the human actions and criticism of the Council's response. Some were merchants who had lost profits to Krex piracy. Others were from species that had faced their own threats. Without Council support, Kane realized that something significant was happening. The galaxy was not as unified in its opposition to humanity as the official channel suggested. There were others who understood that sometimes violence was necessary to protect the innocent. Dr. Alex Morgan, who had been monitoring the alien communications, stepped forward with an analysis that surprised everyone. Thyra felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. These Deathworlders were indeed violent, but their violence was directed at her enemies, not her people. Perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about what it meant to come from a death world. Admiral, our long-range sensors show a massive Krex fleet approaching the system. They will be here within hours. Kane nodded. We have detected them as well. A super dreadnought and escort fleet. Approximately 40 ships. You cannot fight them all, Admiral. Perhaps you should withdraw while you still can. Kane was quiet for a long moment, and Thyra could see him considering the tactical situation. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and determined. Council leader, my people did not travel 200 light years just to run away at the first sign of real opposition. We came here to help your people, and that is what we are going to do. As the human admiral cut the communication link, Thyra realized that she was witnessing something that the galaxy had forgotten. What it meant to have true allies, people, who would stand and fight even when the odds were against them. The Deathworlders had come to save her people. Now she could only hope that it would be enough. The massive Krex reinforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a wall of death. 42 ships led by the super dreadnought Death's Herald, a vessel so large it could be seen with the naked eye from Sanctuary Prime's surface. The ship was 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack continents. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Terra's Fury, studying the sensor readings with his senior staff. The numbers were not encouraging. Even after their victories in the previous battles, the human fleet was down to 11 operational ships. They were outnumbered 4-1 by an enemy that now knew exactly what they were facing. Analysis of the enemy flagship? Kane asked. Engineer Maya Patel, a brilliant woman who had joined the fleet specifically for this mission, pulled up her technical readouts. The Death's Herald is carrying planet-killer weapons, Admiral. Mass drivers capable of destroying all. Life on a world. If it gets into bombardment range of Sanctuary Prime, she did not need to finish the sentence. Kane understood the implications. They could not allow that ship to reach the planet, no matter what the cost. Recommendations? Commander Williams studied the tactical display. Standard fleet engagement. Would be suicide, sir. We need something unconventional. Kane nodded slowly. Conventional tactics had gotten humanity this far, but now they needed to think like the Deathworlders the galaxy believed them to be. Signal all ships. We are implementing Protocol Omega. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Protocol Omega was a set of tactical guidelines that had been developed during humanity's darkest conflicts. They were strategies that most civilized species would consider war crimes, but which were sometimes necessary when facing an enemy that showed no mercy. Dr. Alex Morgan, the fleet's xenobiologist, stepped forward. He was a quiet man who had spent years studying alien physiology and psychology. Admiral, I have been analyzing the Krex command structure. They are a hierarchical species that relies heavily on central authority. If we can disrupt their command and control systems. What do you have in mind, Doctor? Morgan activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of Krex ships. Their vessels are designed around a central command core that coordinates all ship functions. It is more efficient than human designs, but it creates a single point of failure. If we can target these cores specifically, Kane studied the display with interest. How do we identify the command cores from the outside? Energy signatures, sir. The cores emit a distinctive pattern that our sensors can detect. Kane turned to Maya Patel. Can we modify our weapons to target these signatures specifically? Patel nodded enthusiastically. Give me 2 hours, and I can reprogram every missile and projectile in the fleet. But, Admiral, this kind of precision targeting will require us to get very close to the enemy ships. How close? Point-blank range, maybe 10 kilometers. Kane considered the implications. At that range, the human ships would be sitting targets for the superior Krex weapons. But if they could disable the enemy command systems, the technological advantage would be neutralized. Do it, Kane ordered, and prepare boarding parties. Williams looked shocked. Sir, boarding operations against a technologically superior enemy? will be exactly what they do not expect, Kane finished. The Kreks have been fighting civilized species for generations. They have never faced an enemy that fights dirty. Across the system, the human fleet began to implement Kane's plan. Ships moved into asteroid fields and used the debris for cover. Engineers worked frantically to modify weapons and prepare boarding equipment. Marines checked their gear and prepared for close-quarters combat in alien environments. General Vorth watched the human movements with growing concern. The Deathworlder ships had scattered across the system instead of forming a defensive line. It was either brilliant strategy or complete panic. Given what he had seen of their capabilities, he suspected it was the former. "Deploy the fleet in standard bombardment formation," he ordered. "We will destroy their ships one by one, then glass the planet." But as the Kreks fleet advanced, they found themselves under attack from unexpected directions. Human ships emerged from asteroid shadows, fired devastating volleys at point-blank range, then disappeared back into cover before the Kreks could respond effectively. The first casualty was a Kreks heavy cruiser that had its command core destroyed by a precisely targeted missile strike. The ship did not explode. It simply went dead in space, its crew unable to coordinate any response as automated systems shut down one by one. "What happened to the Vengeance?" Vorth demanded. "Unknown, General. All systems simply stopped functioning. The crew is alive but unable to control the ship." Before Vorth could respond, 3 more ships suffered the same fate. The Deathworlders had found some way to disable Kreks vessels without destroying them, leaving their crews trapped and helpless. "All ships, maintain formation," Vorth ordered. "Do not pursue individual targets." But the humans had no intention of allowing the Kreks to maintain their formation. Captain Rodriguez led a squadron of destroyers in a high-speed attack run that split the enemy fleet in half. As the Kreks ships maneuvered to respond, they found themselves under attack from multiple directions by enemies who seemed to have no concern for their own safety. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships rammed Kreks vessels at full speed, their heavily armored hulls crushing through enemy shields and armor. Marines in powered suits launched themselves from airlocks, using personal weapons to fight their way onto enemy ships and disable them from within. Commander Jake Thompson, his ship repaired and back in action, led one of the most audacious attacks of the battle. The lightning strike accelerated to ramming speed directly at a Kreks dreadnought, only to break off at the last second and launch a full spread of boarding pods. "This is Thompson to all boarding teams," he transmitted as his Marines fought their way through Kreks corridors. "Find their command center and shut it down. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people." The Kreks crew fought bravely, but they were not prepared for the sheer aggression of human ground forces. Thompson's Marines had been trained in the corporate wars, where every battle was a fight for survival against better-equipped enemies. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider: explosive decompression, chemical weapons, even hand-to-hand combat with improvised weapons. Within an hour, 5 Kreks ships had been captured by boarding parties. Their crews were taken prisoner and their vessels turned against their own fleet. The psychological impact was devastating. The Kreks had never faced an enemy that could literally steal their ships during battle. But the real prize was the Death's Herald itself. Admiral Kane had been studying the super dreadnought throughout the battle, looking for weaknesses. Maya Patel's modifications had identified 17 separate command cores throughout the massive ship, making it much harder to disable than smaller vessels. "We need to get inside that ship," Kane told his staff. "It is the only way to stop them from bombarding the planet." "Sir, the Death's Herald has over 10,000 crew members," Williams protested. "Even if we could get boarding parties aboard, they would be massively outnumbered." Kane smiled grimly. "Then we better make sure we bring enough firepower to even the odds." The Terra's Fury began its attack run on the Death's Herald, drawing the attention of every weapon on the massive ship. Plasma beams and missile barrages hammered the human dreadnought, stripping away armor and causing massive damage. But Kane held his course, using his ship as a shield for the smaller vessels following behind. At point-blank range, the Terra's Fury launched every boarding pod and assault shuttle it carried. Hundreds of human Marines rocketed toward the enemy. Flagship, their craft shrugging off defensive fire through a combination of heavy armor and sheer audacity. The battle for the Death's Herald lasted 3 hours. Human Marines fought deck by deck through corridors designed for beings twice their size, using everything from assault rifles to improvised explosives. They faced elite Krex warriors armed with energy weapons and protected by powered armor. "Admiral, I have been studying the psychological profiles of the species that are supporting us," he said quietly. "They are all from what the galactic databases classify as marginal worlds, planets that are more hostile than the average garden world. Not full Deathworlders like us, but species that have had to struggle for survival." Kane nodded thoughtfully. That made sense. Species that had never faced real hardship would naturally be more inclined toward pacifism and bureaucracy. But those who had fought for survival would understand the necessity of sometimes meeting violence with greater violence. "Fleet Commander Zalt," Kane said, reopening the general channel. "It seems that your authority is not as absolute as you believed. We propose a different solution to this situation." "What do you propose?" "Single combat. My ship against yours. If you win, we surrender our fleet and submit to Council authority. If we win, you recognize our right to defend innocent people against aggression, and you formally acknowledge the Volani Federation's right to choose their own allies." Zalt's 4 eyes all focused on Kane with what appeared to be disbelief. "Single combat? That is a barbaric custom from pre-spaceflight civilizations." "Perhaps," Kane replied. "But it is also honest. No bureaucracy, no politics, no innocent. People caught in the crossfire. Just a clean test of whose philosophy is stronger." The channel fell silent as Zalt considered the proposal. Kane knew it was a desperate gambit, but it was also the kind of simple, direct solution that appealed to the Deathworlder mindset. Either they were strong enough to defend their principles, or they were not. "Very well," Zalt finally replied. "But we will use standard council rules of engagement. No ramming, no boarding actions, no unconventional weapons." Kane smiled. "Agreed, Fleet Commander. Standard engagement rules." What Zalt did not understand was that standard engagement rules meant very different things to humans than they did to most galactic species. The Terra's Fury was built to fight in the chaotic environment around Earth, where solar storms, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies made every battle unpredictable. The two ships faced each other in the open space between the fleets. Zalt's vessel was larger and more advanced, with energy shields and particle beam weapons that represented the best of Council technology. But Kane had something more important than superior equipment. He had a crew that had been forged in the fires of humanity's most desperate conflicts. The battle lasted 18 minutes. Zalt fought with textbook precision, using long range, weapons and defensive tactics that should have given him every advantage. But Kane fought like a human, using the gravitational field of nearby planets to slingshot his ship into unexpected attack angles and exploiting every weakness in his opponent's defenses. When it was over, Zalt's ship drifted powerless in space, its shields down and its weapons offline. Kane had kept his word. He had not rammed or boarded the enemy vessel. He had simply outfought it using superior tactics and the kind of aggressive maneuvering that only a Deathworlder crew could survive. "Fleet Commander Zalt," Kane transmitted. "Do you yield?" There was a long pause before Zalt responded. "I yield. Admiral Kane, the Council will honor the terms of our agreement." But even as the immediate crisis ended, Kane knew that this was only the beginning. Word of the battle would spread throughout the galaxy, carrying with it the message that the Deathworlders were not the monsters the galactic community had believed them to be. They were protectors. Over the following weeks, Kane found his communication systems flooded with messages from across the galaxy. Some were expressions of support from species that had grown tired of Council inaction. Others were requests for help from civilizations facing their own threats. A few were even formal invitations to establish diplomatic relations. The Volani proved to be valuable allies, sharing their advanced technology in exchange for human military protection. Their scientists worked closely with human engineers to develop new ship designs that combined Volani innovation with human durability. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Council leader Thyra appeared on Kane's screen one morning with news that would change everything. Admiral, I have been in communication with leaders from 17 different species that have withdrawn from the Galactic Council in the past month. They are all interested in forming a new alliance, one that believes in protecting the innocent rather than hiding behind bureaucracy. Kane leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. What are you proposing, Council Leader? A new galactic alliance, Admiral. One that stands for the principle that civilized beings have a responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. An alliance that recognizes that sometimes the greatest kindness is the willingness to fight for what is right. Kane thought about the long journey that had brought him to this point. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy, isolated by fear and misunderstanding. Now they were being asked to help lead a coalition of species that shared their values. What would you call this alliance? Kane asked. Thyra smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both gentle wisdom and fierce determination. The Defenders' Compact, Admiral, because that is what we are, defenders of those who need protection. As Kane looked out at the stars, he realized that Thyra's desperate SOS call had changed more than just the fate of the Volani Federation. It had awakened something in the galaxy that had been sleeping for too long. The understanding that freedom and peace were not gifts to be taken for granted, but treasures to be protected by those strong enough to fight for them. The Deathworlders had answered the call for help. Now the galaxy would never be the same.